my major take home is better take better let's say better advantage of the data that you already have. There's opportunity to analyze data holistically. So that's my major take home. Try to implement this holistic approach. You don't need to do the automation process, but try to connect your diagnostic data when you want to investigate a problem. Try to connect your diagnostic information with the nutritional information.
Well, welcome to the Swine at Canada podcast. I am Dan Columbus, and I will be your host for this episode. And with me today, I have Dr. Edison Magalhaes, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Animal Science at Iowa State University. So welcome, Edison, to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to the conversation. Before we get into that, though, just because some people might not be aware of who you are, I'll just ask you to give a little bit of your background before we get going.
Sure, yeah. So I'm Edison Magalhaes, originally from Brazil. That's where I did my vet school. So I finished my vet school in 2015 and worked for around 4 years in the Brazilian swine industry as just a swine veterinary practitioner for a large producer there in Brazil. And then in 2019, I came to the United States to do my master's and followed by the PhD, both at Iowa State University. Master's was more focused on PRRS regional control programs, and my PhD was focused on mostly data science applied to data from swine producers and building predictive models and understanding risk factors and a lot of data integration. So how to better leverage data available in the industry to help producers to solve their issues. So that was basically my PhD focus specifically on wing-to-finish mortality in that case. So I finished my PhD last year, and I'm here at the Animal Science Department as an assistant professor. Specifically, my major goals will be research and extension, where I'll be continuing applying this data science concept along with epidemiology, production, economics, trying to help swine producers in Iowa and in the whole United States to, as I mentioned before, better take advantage of their data and support the industry.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to this conversation today because one of the things that comes up all the time when we talk to producers is they've put in all these sensors, they collect all this data, and they have all this information, and they have no idea what to do with it, right? It's just sitting there. So maybe we can start with what is the state of the data collection and what's available out there, and then we'll get into what we can do with it.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. What I would say that we have today, let's say we have two different areas related to data being collected by producers. One area is, I would say, the data that everybody's already collecting. So that would be the sow farm records. That could be individual information, but overall they will be all aggregated on a weekly basis. So that's like a sow farm performance report. So you have many different softwares being used out there, and most of the times they have similar reports in terms of weekly KPIs from the sow farms. You also have reports from the growing pigs, nursery, and finishers, or wing to finish, where you have the closeout reports, you have the performance, everything, that kind of a summary of what happened in their life. So a lot of producers, they would have that data and being collected for all the groups of pigs, part of their system. And you would have diagnostic information that will be available through the VDLs. They would be different depending on the VDL, but most of the time they will be similar. You will have nutritional information being collected related to the diets of being used for growing pigs or in the sow farms, within and between farms, and you see the changes of diets also over time. And then you would have some data being collected related to management or procedures that are being conducted in the farm. So, for example, if they're doing cross-fostering or not, if they had a PRRS break or not, if they're doing vaccine X versus vaccine Y. So you would have that type of data. So that I would say that most of the systems, they will have that data. And the other area will be more on the PLF, or the precision livestock farming, where you would have some of those sensors, or more, let's say, fancy data being implemented in the systems. They may be implemented widely in the system, or maybe one or a couple of farms within the system where they would have more technology. So, for example, there will be sensors related to coughing information within the farm, or cameras to record like movement of the animals, behaviors, uh, temperature sensors that would provide better data than just maximum and minimum temperature. So those type of information, I would say that that's what we have today in the industry, the regular data that everybody would have, and some data related more to sensors or PLF that will capture individual data or ongoing data and provide more details. But of course, you would have the trade-off on the cost of that, right?
Right. So I guess the next question is how good are we at using this data? I'm assuming that some are probably, we're very used to looking at pigs per sow per year and stuff like that, right? Maybe not so much on the precision livestock side of it. So maybe just, you know, how good are we? Maybe give us a slap on the wrist.
I think like what we are good on doing is on descriptive analysis. So basically translating that information that I just mentioned to you into some dashboards or visualization. Most the companies that would provide those data recording softwares, let's say like that, they would provide also the dashboard. So we are doing a good job, let's say like that, in terms of summarizing that into dashboards for visualization or reports. But I think the that would be, let's say, the pros and the cons, in my opinion, is that all these data streams that I mentioned to you, they are all disconnected. So they are not talking to each other most of the times. So if you think about one producer, one swine company, and they would have many farms, you may have one standards software recording data for all the farms, or you may have multiple systems. But anyways, depending on the phase of production and what you are talking about, they would have different data infrastructure, and they're not going to be connecting or communicating to each other. So the good news is that we're doing a good job in terms of, say, descriptive analysis, visualization, and we are collecting good data. So, for example, with everything that I've done in the past years in terms of research, we never ask producers to record more data or new data. We use the information that is already available as part of their data collection routine. So that's like the good side of things. But the major thing, in my opinion, is the lack of connectivity or integration between the data streams. And we know that at the end of the day, they are all connected, right? So we know that the pigs, to have a good performance, that depends not only on the regular performance of the animals or winning age or that type of thing, but we'll have health factors affecting performance. You would have nutritional factors affecting the performance. You would have environmental factors, and most of the times they would be affecting the performance of the pigs at the same time. So you may have a problem with the diet and also a problem with a PRRS challenge or a E. coli challenge. Everything happened at the same time. So integration, in my opinion, is where we are really, let's say, it's our low hanging fruit.
Yeah. So when we talk about integration would be one of those things, right? So I guess maybe that leads very well into how do you see improving the use of the data that's being collected? So, integration would be one area. Maybe there's some other suggestions.
Yeah, it's all everything is going to start with data integration and make sure that diagnostic information would integrate to the nutritional information, to the environment, to the KPIs of the farms, with across the production phases, because you may have a group of pigs that started in the sow farm, and then they're commingle with other groups, and then until they reach the packing plant, there's three or four different flows depending on what's commingling or not. So integrating and building that package is key for that. But the other thing will be automation. So I would say that we are able to do this process of integration, but that will be manually. So the key thing here is to automate the process, because if you think about one company, they would have different, like I mentioned before, data streams and softwares being used. But if you build one system specific algorithm or script code, so you doing the programming side of things. If you build a company specific code, you can automate the process because the data infrastructure usually doesn't change a lot inside a company. So that's a good news as well. So you're not going to have, for example, a software to collect data from the sow farm, and next year you change that, and the other year you change. So usually that doesn't happen often in a company. So if you build a system specific algorithm, that will allow you to integrate that data on a daily basis or a weekly basis, depending on how often you want to do that.
Yeah. Do you have specific examples of maybe some ongoing research that you're doing where you're looking at it, like the algorithms and the integration and that?
Yeah, I've done, like I mentioned, started in my PhD, and I'm continuing to do that. But I've been working with three swine producers in the U.S. and a couple others in one in Brazil and another one in Mexico. But basically, the approach will be that to build a system specific algorithm. So, what they do is they provide access to the data streams that they want to utilize or be included in this project. So, like I mentioned, the weekly performance of the sow farms in their company, the closeouts of the groups, diagnostics, nutrition, and that type of thing. And we access, let's say, access that data, and then we start building codes on a software that basically doing a lot of programming, where we look at each data from each phase and we try to do that connection. So it takes a couple of months to do that process. It's not easy, and it's really, let's say, system specific. But once it's ready, they can now send the same data, but with for new data, but with the same infrastructure, and we just run the code again. And at the end of the day, the type of report that we would build in this work, if you think about like a, let's say, one company that had, I don't know, 2,000 groups of pigs marketed in the previous year, for, let's say, 2023 until September 2024, and you have like 2,000 groups of pigs, let's say around 1,200 pigs per group on average. So the information that we would build for those groups of pigs would be from the sow farm, everything that is happening like in the breeding groups, in the farrowing room, respective to the batch of pigs that are going to the packing plant. So if they're mixing, so if you have let's say a closeout that went to the packing plant where half of the pigs are from different sow farms, we built the information from each sow farm for that group. So that group received, for example, 500 pigs from a sow farm with a weaning age of 20 days, 21 days, a standard deviation of 2 days, and the other 500 came from this weaning age. And this farm had a rotavirus diagnosis, let's say, when the piglets were 10-day old. So there's a code saying that there's a flag here. This group had a challenge with, for example, rotavirus when they were 10 days old with their moms. So basically trying to connect, like I mentioned, nutritional, diagnostics, health, production, but for all the phases, and you create like a background check for the pigs. That's basically the automation and building that system specific infrastructure, right? Trying to analyze.
Yeah, you mentioned having sows coming from different facilities or whatever, right? So does it make it easier then to compare across systems when you are bringing in all these different variables and data into the analysis?
Uh, yeah, I think the major goal here is to characterize what's happening in the reality
Yeah,
of the system. So you can compare, for example, groups that are mixing sow farms compared to single
yeah,
flow groups. So that's the goal. But within groups, you can also want to, it's basically create what's the snapshot of each sow farm in each time of the year. And then you can do a better comparison with the other groups. So internal benchmarking
yeah.
purpose.
So it also comes to be the researcher side of me is coming out. Is there when you're doing this and now you're bringing in other factors that maybe they were collecting this but they weren't including it when they were looking at their performance data or something. When you've been doing this, do you have or have you found any kind of surprising results that you're like, oh, we didn't think that had that impact, or it had more of an impact than you thought, or less?
We had a couple of findings for this research, but I think the key take home from the past, let's say, 5 years that we have been working on this, we saw some system specific impact of diseases, but the impact of sow farm on the downstream performance was always very, let's say, significant. And we all know that, we all expect that, right? Let's say that the winning quality score is important, but how big is that impact, or how important it is, and that changes over between systems and within farms within a system. Uh, but most of the times they are very significant. So let's say from systems that the mortality, win to finish mortalities is explained, 50% is explained by sow farm factors, up to 70%, depending on the system. So depending on health challenge, but even though if it's high or low, it's, in my opinion, it's a high impact. And the another key thing that we like to do is measuring effect of specific diseases that we know that are important. So, for example, PRRS, mycoplasma, E. coli breaks, lateral breaks in growing pigs, that type, that type of thing. But measuring that, accounting for the other factors that we collect in this database. So we do a better job, let's say, in doing a retrospective analysis of those groups. So you now have information of some confounders. So the delta, or the impact of those factors, those diseases, will have a better measurement.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. We all say early life is important, but it's like, yeah, it's more important for some than others, but always important. I think that's really interesting. And
Yeah.
it's always one of the things, especially when we talk about disease challenge and stuff like that, right? Where we say, oh, it has this impact, but is it always that, depending on the system, or is the impact less, in some? So it's very, very interesting. So
Yeah.
what is needed then for other producers to start implementing this in their data science?
I think what is needed is some sort of investment or focus on having a person with a skills related to programming, but also with skills on the with an animal science, or a veterinary background. Uh, then that person can do that type of work. So programming is key. So you want to do integration with automation, right? Because other most of the producers, if they want to start that right now, they don't have to collect any new data, like I mentioned before. Everything that we've done so far with a good, let's say, in terms of forecasting, for example, which is a key thing for us, good performance in terms of forecasting using the data that they already have, so not collecting new data. So, for example, I would love to see a producer providing individual winning weight. And that will be a really good predictor when I run my prediction models here for nursery mortality, for example. But we know that it's hard. So what we have, sometimes it's an aggregated winning weight for that truck. So we don't know the standard deviation there. So it will be really nice to have that data collected, but we know that it's hard. So if producer wants to start that, don't need to think about new data. It's basically applying the same similar approach that we have been doing, of course, in terms of this programming, so we can do integration and an automation in the background. And there's some research out there that we've published, so they would have good examples on how to see that. There would be other people doing, and of course, we would be willing to support. And in terms of I think my major goal here at Iowa State now is on the educational part of this, try to stimulate more this approach, show how we are doing here, but everybody can do that, in my opinion.
Yeah. So other than contacting you and hiring your future graduate students, maybe, what are the next steps for the swine industry?
So that's the first step is integration, like I mentioned, but the other step is okay, improving the data collection. There are new information that could be collected. That the widely implementation of, for example, the PLF technologies, the sensors, the cameras. I think that once we start having this type of holistic data analysis, those individual recording systems will provide a better information for us. So in terms of forecasting and everything that we can do with this type of data, the more individual data will be key. So, but what I think it's already important, like I mentioned before, is that we with what we already have today, we're already seeing promising results. So I think the future is just going to get better as we improve the data collection.
Yep. More information is usually better and individualized, like you said.
Yeah, and it's become widely implemented, right? So
Yeah.
I think the costs are going to reduce for that. So we're going to have more sensors, those related to sound and image or weight, behavior, that type of thing, both in the growing phase, but also for the sow farm.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, coming to the end, so just maybe if you have one take-home message for our listeners today.
Yeah, well, I think my major take home is better let's say better advantage of the data that you already have. There's opportunity to analyze data holistically. So that's my major take home. Try to implement this holistic approach. You don't need to do the automation process, but try to connect your diagnostic data when you want to investigate a problem. Try to connect your diagnostic information with the nutritional information. If you have a lateral break, go there and try to see water and feed disappearance in that barn. I think this holistic approach, we do a better use of our data. I don't like the raw comparison of means, like groups that have this disease versus that one, and that's the impact on mortality. I don't like that. So there are tools out there to do this, and we have the data. So I think that's the major take home.
Yeah, very good.
It's time for our famous three. Fumonisins are one of the most prevalent mycotoxins in North America and can impact the performance of your feed and pigs. The CFIA recently approved MycoFix Fumezyme from DSM Firmenich to help swine producers combat fumonisins in their swine feed. Protect your pigs and fumonisins at MycoFix with Fumezyme. Learn more at dsm.com/MycoFix.
Well, before I let you go, we have three final questions to ask you. The first one is, what is your favorite swine-related book or resource?
I always like to see the SDRS and the MDM Shimp reports. So SDRS is diagnostic data here from Iowa State is a project collects diagnostic data. So you have a snapshot of the detection of some pathogens in the U.S. And I also like to see the MSHIMP data, which is more on the prevalence side related to PRRS, PD, and disease, and that's by the University of Minnesota. I like those two tools, and you receive the reports from them, so you can have a better understanding of the picture. And the book will be the disease of swine. I'm biased to say that, but it's my go-to book when I ever have a question.
Yep. That one pops up every once in a while, every couple of episodes, so it's common. So our next one is what is your favorite book or resource outside of pigs?
I like a book from by Jordan Peterson. It's called The 12 Rules for Life. I think it's a really nice book. I read that book a couple years ago, and this year I'm reading again, but this time on the audiobook. So it's a really nice book. They have like just 12 rules, and if you really try to apply those, it stays in your mind. So that's the one that I like.
Yeah, great. Okay, our final question then is, you look back at leaders or mentors or say even, producers that you've worked with. What is a characteristic that you think that the successful ones all seem to share?
That's a tough one. There's some good things that we always look. I would say resilience. So instead of complaining, that person that it's always trying to solve the problem. But maybe the major one, in my opinion, is passion. So if you do something with passion, if you are a professional and you are working with passion and you really love that, things are going to work out and you're going to figure out a way, depending on personality or everything. But if you're doing that with passion and you like that work, you're going to find a way and you're going to be successful. People that lack passion on some specific work, my opinion, they can try to find something else and be successful in that other area.
Perfect. Well, it's been great having you on the show. So I'll thank you again for coming on and sharing the information on data science with us.
Perfect. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.